Okay, my name is Stephanie Rosario. I was born in Harlem, New York. I grew up in Queens, and my family's from the Dominican Republic.
Thank you, Stephanie, for being the first one. Woo!
Popping a cherry.
Yes. I want to thank you because this is something that I think is really important. I find that a lot of the times when we talk about relationships, when we talk about marriage, people get uncomfortable. And I wanted to interview, and like I stated, this is research, right? This is a beginning stage of kind of understanding what relationships and what marriage really means. So, are you talking to someone? Are you married? Tell me.
Well, first of all, thank you, Jenny, for having me. I was really excited about this project when I heard about it. I can't wait to see the finished outcome because I know it's going to be spicy. And to answer your question, I am single. I've been single for 4 years now.
Okay. How is it like being single in 21st century, 2020 just passed? We're now 2021. How is it to be single during this strange time?
It's kind of interesting because you do a lot of getting to know people. You meet a lot of people, and then we have this thing where we ghost them after a while, after getting to know people, after opening up. You end up just ghosting them. It's like, what? Thought we were vibing, what happened? So that's kind of like the dating world now. It's very instant, very fast.
Very quick, right?
Yeah.
So when you say ghosting, can you elaborate what the term ghosting means? I'm using quotation marks.
So when you're dating or talking to someone, ghosting would mean you just kind of like go from talking to them to all of a sudden losing full communication with them. Like they kind of disappear. I guess that's where the term ghosting came from.
Okay, so what I'm hearing from you is that people have a tendency of not really being upfront about how they feel, and instead of confronting it, there's avoidance.
Yeah, big time.
There's a big sense of avoidance. There's a big sense of avoidance,
yeah.
Right? Okay, so when it comes to marriage, tell me what marriage means to you.
Marriage, so it's like a big thing, right? Like an elephant. So to break it down, I would say the word that comes to mind is like teammate, maybe partner, union. Those are like the words that come to my mind when I think of marriage.
What is the healthiest marriage you've seen in your life?
The healthiest example would be my aunt and her husband. They have like what I would see as like ideal marriage.
So what is your ideal marriage?
Okay, describing their marriage. This is like, a complicated question. To describe their marriage, they've been together for a while. They're like both individuals, but I think they give each other enough like space and support.
Is it something you've thought about before or no?
No, to be honest, it's not.
So, according to society, we're at the age, right, that we should have been married. I think it's interesting you've never thought about it. Why do you think that is?
I don't think I thought of the actual event, like the dress, the planning. I thought of the destination and things like that, like the fun things. But I guess I never met the person that I would be like, okay, this is the person I would want to do this with.
So what you're saying is you never thought about the connection?
No.
Why?
I don't know. I think we get kind of caught up women are maybe women in our age group get caught up of the prettiness of the wedding, the marriage. We think marriage, we think wedding. Or I get to plan a party. That's my party, and I get to invite everyone that I love, and they're coming like to honor me. And that's kind of like what I think about. But when I think of the rest of it, it's kind of like
It makes you uncomfortable.
It's like the honeymoon ends. Like,
why does that make you uncomfortable connecting with someone else?
I think a lot of people discuss like what men lose when they marry, but we don't discuss what women end up losing when they get married. I think women lose like their freedom when they get married because it's you have the burden. It's a burden, like almost like you have the burden of like holding down the family, like.
That's interesting that you say that because I think that it goes both ways. And I think it's interesting that you're using your time being married as a burden. Did you make that connection before?
Yes.
So, do you want to get married?
I mean, I've always wanted to get married, but I started thinking that maybe it was just something.
Repeat that again, because it's really fun.
I've always wanted to get married, but I started to think maybe it was something that just was an idea that was conditioned into my mind that I have to do. So now I'm kind of entertaining the idea that it's not really something I have to do.
Okay. Does that make you sad, or how do you feel about that?
It actually makes me feel a little free, because it's like, I don't have that pressure of having to get married, or like, it makes me feel like, okay, I can't, and it will be okay either way.
I think it's interesting that, like, to some degree you think that being in a marriage or being committed to some degree, that one lacks connection. That was the first thing you said. And then two, it is a burden. What about those relationships or those marriages in which there is a connection and it's not a burden? Do you visualize that for yourself?
I do. I have thought of it like, okay, it could be nice if it was just, again, like a partnership, a teammate. But that's rare. That's rare to find. That's hard.
Why?
Because people don't take out the time to get to know each other, especially in this society with the instant everything, social media, the dating sites. And we live in New York City where everything is like 20 minutes away. You hop on a train, you get to the Bronx, you get to West Village, and like the same day. You could date 3 people on the same day if you wanted to.
Okay. So you're saying that to some degree you feel like there's too many options?
Yes, especially for New Yorkers.
Okay. So having all these extra options doesn't allow for what?
For people to really connect. For people to get to know each other, to enjoy the dating stages, like, take it easy. It's like very fast. It's like you meet, you sleep together, you forget each other, you ghost each other, and you guys never met. And that's exhausting. If you do that like a few times, you'll be turned off by the idea of dating.
So connection. You mentioned that before. What is connection for you? What does connecting with someone mean?
Connecting definitely means like, sharing your thoughts with that person, talking, like quality conversations, no small talk, spending time together, sharing your ideas. That's connecting to me.
Okay. Who was the last person you felt connected to?
These are tough questions. I would say my cousin was one of the last people. Did you mean like
Yeah, well, I meant like a romantic connection.
A romantic connection. Damn. Well, I feel like I can connect to a lot of people I've been romantically involved with, but I don't feel they can connect to me. That's the problem. I feel like I can connect to them, I can understand them, I can understand their feelings, but they can't reciprocate that.
Do you feel like, and just some thoughts, what if you are stopping yourself from connecting with them because you fear vulnerability and you fear a letdown?
That could be a possibility. The last one, maybe I push myself away because I'm scared that they might leave or, might ghost me. So maybe.
Is that something you've thought about before?
I have thought about maybe I self-sabotage. That's what I've thought of.
Where do you think that comes from?
Just like trying to have a sense of control of the outcome. Like, if it ends, it's on my terms, and not the person. That other person can't decide how it's gonna end. I have to be able to decide.
Isn't it crazy how much fear chooses for you rather than you choosing for yourself? And maybe the lack of connection comes from not allowing yourself to connect because you rather let fear choose for you than you choose for yourself.
Yeah, maybe.
Does that make you uncomfortable?
A little bit. This whole thing is making me uncomfortable, actually.
Well, thank you for bearing with me. Just a few more questions and then we'll be over. So tell me about the older generations that you've seen, right? What does marriage you feel like mean for them?
I'm actually a little jealous of the older generation. Like, I feel they had like a very romantic time period. Like, a lot of courting. Like my aunt, the one I just mentioned, she was like, she told me and her daughter, I actually feel sorry for you girls. Like, even though you have all the opportunities I didn't have, like you grew up in the United States, you're educated, you're bilingual, but the men in your generation are just different. So she kind of put the blame on the men, but she's like, they don't provide like, the older generation. And she was like, they used to do their dirt, but they would provide and protect, and they used to court us. They used to like send us flowers, things like that. So yeah, that's what I think about. I think about the I guess the romance of it. My mom and my aunt often mentioned like if their boyfriend would mess up, they would send them someone to serenade them and things like that. My mom used to tell me, my dad, when he would mess up, he would send a band to her house and they would play music all night until she forgave him.
That's so romantic.
I was like, whoa, that's my dad did that? Okay. So it was definitely a different time. And I kind of feel like, us growing up watching fairy tales, they like actually lived that fairy tale. So it's kind of sweet, I guess. And that's where their idea of romance, marriage, relationships come from.
So I have an interesting question for you. I agree, the older generation had way more romance than this one. However, there was a lot more of avoidance. There was a lot more quiet of the bullshit. Mm-hmm. We are a generation that does not stay quiet. So do you think it is that there was romance, or do you think there was just more avoidance?
Maybe a mixture of both. Because going back to what I said earlier about the burden, I think that feeling of marriage as a burden comes from the fact that my grandmother, some of my aunts, they put up with a lot of shit.
But do you see how this comes full circle?
Yeah.
How I talk about, you say that you're jealous of the older generations, but then at the same breath, you're like, yeah, it's a burden. So I think that we all, right, are struggling with understanding how to connect in a way that we still hold that romance and that romantic gesture and that connection with the realness of that generation wise, that pressure on men, to be the one who provides and protects. It's almost impossible now, considering that, the economy has been up and down. In our generation alone, we've experienced 2 downfalls of an economy, making it really hard for a household to be just held by one person.
Right.
Also, back in the day, you can have a 2-year degree and be able to get any job and be able to work a decent job. Now you need to pretty much have a fucking PhD if you need to, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so, definitely times have changed. But I guess what she meant was kind of like, the steps of getting to know people,
Courtship.
Yeah, courtship. Like she said, for example, her husband went to her house and did all these proper steps just to date her. So once you do all these steps to date someone, you're kind of committed, because you're jumping through hoops to basically date someone. Whereas here, it's like at your phone.
Your disposal.
Yeah, you don't need to even travel that much. Living in New York, you get on a train and you meet someone in 50 minutes. Like, you just connected with them online and you could meet them in 10, 15 minutes.
But it's not a true connection.
No.
So, if you can give any words of advice, what would you say?
Word of advice to anyone?
Anyone, even to yourself.
I would say just slow it down a bit. We live in a fast city. Some of us work 2 jobs and we have a lot going on. Just take your time getting to know someone. Become friends first.
You think you could believe in marriage again?
If if I see maybe more examples of a good marriage, maybe. Because right now I can only think of 2 relationships that I'm like, yes, those people are who I want to be like. But the majority of relationships I see, I sense that someone is settling, someone is not happy, and they don't have to say this, but you can kind of feel the energy. Someone's settling, someone's unhappy. There might be some cheating. It's like in my career, I run into a lot of married couples, and I'm like, this is uncomfortable here. There's something off here. But people put on a face for society. They don't want to be seen as like a failure.
So there's a lot of imagery. Everything is an image.
Yeah.
Right? But it's the same thing when we go on Instagram. It's the same thing when we go on Facebook. I think a lot of times people want to live up to this image. Mm-hmm. And when they fall short of it, I think it's real hard for you as people. Right? Because then that feels like you failed.
You failed, yeah.
Right. Well, thank you for giving me your time and your conversation. I think this is good. This is the beginning stages of this. I appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.